1E.1, granting and accepting capacity transfers. The genesis for this particular board item is that the district received a request from a property owner to transfer capacity between two lots that this customer owns. One property already has water on it and connections, capacity has been paid for, yet it's due to the slope and such, it's a less desirable lot. They own another lot which they would like to transfer capacity from the existing lot to the newer lot. These lots are in the same general service area, and that's one of the conditions of this request. We're being very specific about the conditions that we're applying to this amendment of policy, because we want to make sure that, one, it is in the same service area. Two, it is owned by the same individual. Three, it's adjacent to an existing distribution or collections infrastructure, and they're current on all fees and assessments, and this is for residential complexes, residential only.
And it's specific to this particular neighborhood because the capacity fees were actually taken in advance of building permits being issued.
Right.
So this was a unique circumstance based upon a history of actions that we had then.
This resolution is specific to what subdivision?
It could apply district-wide, but we believe that this is the only subdivision we apply it to.
The property owners are here today. I believe it's up in
Forest Meadow.
Yes. And it is very specific. You can't transfer between service areas, so if it's in Forest Meadows, you can't transfer it down to Copper and such. And they are current on all their fees and have been paying for 4 years now.
Well, I have no problem with this, so I'll make a motion whenever it's appropriate, but I thought we had rules in effect that we could do this anyway.
Current
How
policy.
do we do it in 8604?
In this, we don't. Current policy is no termination of service, and that's why we're amending this.
Oh, because there's a termination of service. So
At the existing lot, they will terminate service at that lot and transfer the service over to the new lot.
But there are, in some of our assessment district areas, we have people who hold entitlements that they can transfer within that assessment district. That's a different animal.
Yes, sir.
I don't understand what you just said.
Say that again?
You didn't understand what you said.
Okay, that's it said twice now.
No, you said we have that ability already in some of the,
Well, in 8604, there are properties that have like 140-acre parcel, they have 40 ESFU equivalents or partial equivalents, and they're allowed to transfer those to another property owner in 8604 for their value.
I'm trying to process.
Still doesn't
It's a
understand.
similar situation, but not the same, because this is already has,
This is a service.
this is the service, and that's the difference here.
But when you're talking about an existing system that's paying monthly charges, even though they've never,
What I'm saying is, it's not related to this, I'll explain it later, but if they are in the assessment district, they haven't perfected their assessment, but it has value. It might be worth $6,000 and the capacity fee may be $15,000, but if they want to sell those or transfer them to another lot, they're allowed to do that.
Okay, we're off topic. We're going to get back on the agenda item, which is not about
I think it's
8604.
a good tangential deal, because you're not talking about in 604 of an existing, there were no specific lots. They signed up for so many hookups, but their lots were not designated. And so you could say, well, I want to do more lots or less lots, or want to transfer around. It's a different situation than in this case.
Right, it is.
I tried to research that. We pulled out our manual here to look through that. It's very confusing. I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but this whole thing seems to be doing it for one person only, and one entity only. there may be an opportunity for others. I had questions like, how much was the original fee and what are the fees now? Are they the ones who paid the original fees? Or did they buy it? Is somebody gonna be able to come in and buy a lot in the future to say, look, I wanna just move it from this lot over to this other lot? I'm confused that there's a potential here to be an abuse of this possibility with others. I don't know if this one is an abuse or not, but I've got a lot of questions on how we do this. I keep thinking that looking through this, our board policies, this whole section has been amended a number of times. There's a lot of confusion in there. And I'd almost like to see this come back as a revised, the whole section revised, including how to do this, and tighten this up a little bit so it's not kind of leaves a bunch of open questions.
Very good questions. And this was initiated by an individual property owner. The property owner purchased the property and it had capacity fees paid for. The property owner has another piece of property, and this is restricted only to the same owner of the two properties. In other words, it can't be from one property owner to another property owner. We're really tightening this down so that it's very restrictive. I don't think there's room for abuse, especially if we're restricting it to the same service area. It can't go from Forest Meadows up to Arnold. It can't go from Forest Meadows down to Copper Cove. So it is very restrictive in that regards. In terms of looking at the policies and updating the policies, that's a very exhaustive process and very time-consuming. I defer to Mitch on that, but I think in this particular case, by the time we do go through that process, especially with the internal resources we have, I think we could actually probably be past the building season for this year. And so I would like to take a look at this in this particular one. We are recommending moving forward, but as far as coming back with the rest of the policies, we can look at that.
Do we have a motion on this item?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I want to, first of all, I don't want to complicate this for the folks sitting here in the audience. I will vote for this in whatever form it is, but I don't like the idea that it has to be the same owner. I mean, it never ceases to amaze me how this district will turn customers away. You know, we get about 3 or 4 letters a year where somebody has paid for a water meter years ago and doesn't want to pay the bill anymore, but doesn't want to give away what they purchased. And why would we care if they put it on the open market and sold it to somebody? I don't care how much they sell it for. Let that market exist on its own, but it'll allow another person to hook up to our system. So I mean, I'll vote for this in whatever form it is, but I would rather make a motion and exclude owned by the same owner. Why do we care?
The ownership in this case is a factor only because it's an existing service that's really just moving its service to a different location within the same service
Why do
area.
we care who the title holder is?
Because ultimately, there's still the provisions for the non-disconnect, and so we'd have to clean up that whole thing.
Right, but it's not a disconnect. If the provision should be that whoever takes ownership of the hookup becomes a card carrier member of CCWD. I mean, so there is no disconnect.
call it a transfer or a disconnect and a reconnect. I think it's
I mean,
maybe
we
it's,
want more connections, right? I mean, and we
It seems
We
reasonable.
just got a letter where somebody is, you know, they don't want to pay the $700, and my answer to those folks, and they never like to hear it, is sell the lot. Well,
Yeah,
maybe
and
an adjacent lot to them or something, they don't want to sell it, but they don't want to have that connection charge. Why not allow them to sell their connection charge or their connection?
and avoid a tax lien, in that particular case of the one we just received, it's gonna be avoiding a tax lien in the future.
Well, in most cases, the connection is tied to the infrastructure that had to be put into place to serve those lots.
Well, I know, we can
But no longer.
work our way around that, but I'm all for Dennis's, review, but I would prefer, if they think this policy is gonna be recreated, I just don't see any reason why we should, why the same owner is an issue.
General policy is we do not sell a meter until a building permit is issued. So,
No.
yes.
Does that address it? Does that address?
Well, I'm opposed to that too.
See, this is a remnant in the time frame. This is a remnant in the time frame, and those homeowners that are out there, or those property owners that are out there, and that's why I was a little hesitant as to that it doesn't apply just directly to this particular subdivision, because we probably have some others out there too. And that's why creating some leeway in here. We can look at the owner's name. We don't want to create a speculative market either, and that's part of, but we should be cleaning up these lots that already have a service connection paid and get the building there if we can, because ultimately that's how you get.
Or allow them to transfer their connection to somebody who will use it. If a building permit is required.
We'll be seeing these on eBay, we're seeing connections on
Listen,
Craigslist.
I don't know that if you really if you look at case law, where people, particularly on sewer equivalents, have bought commercial buildings in canneries, and I know in the city of Tracy, they sold the Heinz building, and it came with a huge amount of capacity, and no one realized that until they went and sold that sewer capacity for millions and millions of dollars, and they were upheld in court, even though they were challenged. So I'm not 100% positive that we can really prevent people from transferring their capacity.
Well, I like there's so many questions in here, and my heart really makes me feel terrible about what we do to a lot of people, saying that they've never been able to complete their building of their house that they were going to, and now they're paying monthly fees for water they don't use and don't need, and we've turned them down on any kind of relief. I actually like the idea where they could sell their connection for somebody who would build a house. I wish we had the ability to do that, but I've been told every time that we can't do that. This is, I don't have a problem with doing this, but I don't like doing this for one person and coming up with a policy that is, we don't know if there'll be any others in the future. Will people be able to go in and buy two lots, one with and one without, and say, okay, now I'm the owner of both, let me transfer over here from this place that's less desirable to this place that's more desirable. You know, I've known, not well, but I've known Eric for many years, and I'd like to do him a favor, but I just don't like the way this thing's coming down.
But can I make a suggestion? Can we just take this case by case and then just have an engineering committee? Because there's several other things on this. I think that if we look at the overall, if we want to come up with an overall solution, you know, it's like, you know, no structures on, for the lot receiving capacity. You know, no established account with CCWD. What if they have a well and they happen to be on sewer? I mean, there are those circumstances out there. And so this is really, client specific, so to speak. And maybe we could take a look at some more general principles and come up with a way to transfer, allow people the ability to get out from under their, you know, their bare lot, water meter or whatever it is that they have. I don't think it would be, we could never do it for sewer, but for water, if they have not perfected their permit, I think we should allow them to give it to somebody who will, so we have a happier customer.
We can look at that in the engineer. I mean, certainly we've got this issue out there, and this is a case where we have defined it with like lot by like lot, all within a service area. The district isn't harmed. The customers in the area get no harm as a result. So again, it's seemed like a pretty straightforward case, and there are others. So it's not just this particular individual client out there. There are a few others out there, but to be frank, we couldn't identify them.
Could we agree to move forward on this issue? Mr. Dean has a comment on it, and then set up an engineering committee meeting, which includes Dennis and Jeff seem to have a big interest in this matter.
Two things. Number one, since this is a specific case, can we approve this resolution for that specific case?
This is not a specific case. This is a policy that applies, that has a very limited group because it was a remnant of a period of time. And the policy applies to those folks that are in that category. And so again, it's not about the specifics other than we narrowed it down to being a like lot for like lot within a service area with the same owner. Certainly those provisions are carried forward. The broader issue that Director Davidson's referring to is, it's been ongoing here, and frankly, this gave us some insights into some criteria that might actually be useful to relieve, a burden and maybe help some other folks out there get out from what they want to do. But I don't see this particular circumstance necessarily being the same, because this was a result of a period in time, and the policies that have been changed since then.
Well, the other part of my question is, since it's not a specific case, have we addressed the issue of a lot being purchased 10 years ago and the capacity fee being paid but nothing constructed, and now they want to move that, and are they required then to upgrade the cost of the capacity fee and stuff like that? Those are the kinds of questions that I think need to go into policy. But I see these folks being faced with a situation where they have a specific issue that we can address, and I'd love to be able to address it and then go back and clean up the policy.
We can do that. That's what we're saying.
Well, if we can do that, then I'd make a motion that we pass this resolution to help these people.
Second.
I would like to table this, come back next meeting and with an expanded deal, saying that anybody who has never perfected a building permit, is paying on a deal that has personal problems, they need to get out from under these bills, can put it on the market to be sold for whatever they think they can get for it, to move to another lot, as long as it's on the same system, whether it's the same owner or not.
I nominate you and Bob to be on the personal problem review committee.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, Dennis, we already have a motion and a second on this agenda item. And I think we've agreed to that the engineering committee would take up this article as well as other policy articles in a future meeting. Any other comment?
We're just gonna do the opposite of that. We're gonna vote on this, let this
Right.
go forward, and then we'll have an engineering committee, and we'll review this and come up with a more common document.
Unless the vote doesn't go that way. But with a motion and a second, we're well on our way on this one.
In doing it this way, we have put the solution to pass it and then go look at the policy instead of the opposite way, which I think we should look at the policy first and get it adopted. I would probably even suggest expanding it even more than what it is on this particular policy, but I think that has to be done first.
Well, staff has made a recommendation. I mean, they see this as an okay thing. We're about to vote on it. I think if we need to change it, we can always change. It's a rule and regulation. We can change it again next month if we come up with some different ideas.
The president said we could keep our doctor if we wanted it.
You gotta have one first.
You got a doctor?
I call for the question.
Okay, any further comment? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
4-1. Mr. Dooley was voting no.
And by voting no, I'm not saying I'm opposed to doing this deal, I just think we've done it before, we've acted on this before, we really should be ready to act on it.
And I'm very comfortable acting in the way we did. I don't think we've heard anything here that we're going to broaden it most likely, and this would fall into that category anyway. And then we're,
So
if
you
it's
say, I
possible
don't
that,
agree with you, but so you say.
okay.
Well, I think implied in the vote, or the resolution in the vote was that there would be a review of policy to be brought back to the board.
Right.
You
By
go
the engineering.
Look at this, and you go look at that policy, and that's screwy, the way that thing is set
You're on the
up now.
engineering committee, you look at that.
Can I get clarification on what
I'm sorry, if you got a,
You're all good.
You're fine.
Did you vote
could you come to the microphone though if you'd like to speak at the meeting though? Thank you.
Did you vote on exactly what was presented, or did you vote on our individual case?
There was no modification of the proposal that was brought
So
before
that
us.
was voted on in whole, and
We voted on, and it was a 4-1
it's not
in
just for
favor.
our benefit, it's whoever wants to do
Right,
it.
but
then
we're
they do.
gonna, what we're gonna do is we're gonna have an engineering committee meeting, which is myself and Director Dooley, and come up, we wanna broaden this.
Right.
We think it's too specific, or at least we're gonna take a look at the ability to broaden it, so it allows lot transfers of different owners.
So just so you get some history on this, in our situation in Forest Meadows, some of you on the board will remember, we got into a moratorium situation that was coming down the road, and the board gave us so long to get a water and sewer connection. To get that, you had to have, a set of plans into the county, you had to have your permits pulled and paid for before you could come over, which is the same situation now. Like a couple years ago, when we were thinking about building, but the economy was too bad, I called the board and I asked Steve Hutchings, who was the engineer at the time. He said, yes, if I brought in a approved set of plans from the county and had all the fees paid, that we could transfer the connection from the lot that we had it on over to the new lot where we had all the things paid for. But once we got ready now, because the economy is better, I called CCWD to make sure that was still in effect, and they said, no, we don't have that policy. But anyway, the thing is, back during that time, there were about 30 lots in Forest Meadows where a set of plans were turned in, paid for, the permits were all paid for, they came over, they got a water connection for the lot, and then the plans were turned back in, and they got their money back. So you're going to have, in the future, see, the reason you haven't had this situation come up since the last 6 years, because there hasn't been a house built in Forest Meadows in the last 6 years. We're going to be, hopefully if this all works, we're going to be the first to stick our neck out there and build a house. But you have 30 lots that were like that. So you need to, this policy is good because you're going to have more situations like this where people over the last 6 years who are going to build, not going to come up anymore, maybe they've died, who knows what's happened to them, but they're not going to use that connection anymore, but somebody else may. Because what I'm saying, there's a lot of these connections that were never built on, and they're just sitting there, and all of us have been paying thousands of dollars just for these connections that we haven't been able to use. So I really appreciate the fact that you're giving us the opportunity to actually pay for something we're going to be able to use after all these years. Anyway,
Okay.
That's it.
Well,
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, item 5F, discussion action regarding approval of engineering services agreement with HDR for tank management plan. Both of you guys are looking at each other. Jeffrey Myers listed on the, but Mitch seems anxious to get talking.
Well, I hope not to talk too much. In summary, this is the fundamental plan that has to underline the improvement projects for the R&R program going up the hill in the Ebbets Pass area. By getting this work done, we'll have our tank management plan done district-wide, but we'll understand the hydraulics of how the system will operate in the future with the improvements that are going to go forth. So at that, I'm going to ask for your authority to enter into this contract to get the professional service agreement for engineering services for the tank management plan.
Mitch, I know we had a comment when we hired our district engineer that, was there engineers from the area, from the Calaveras County area? We had more discussion on that here and keeping money local and spending money on local. And I think the answer was they were included, but didn't happen to be selected. In this particular case here, we got 7 engineering firms. How many of those were from Calaveras County?
This was the same selection process as we referred to earlier, where we went out for a pool of consultants and created the pool of the consulting firms. In there is one firm that was specifically located within Calaveras County, and it was the only firm in any of the applicants that was specifically from Calaveras County.
Out of the 7 that are referred to in this discussion?
Right. We looked at a broader number of firms. I don't know whether it was 13 or whatever. Then ultimately, 18, engineering firms. Of those 18, there was only one from Calaveras County, and that's part of the group that's within the 7. That's the pool that we're looking at. And then ultimately of that pool, this firm was selected to be, because frankly, of the firms, there were only 2 that really probably had the capacity within the firm to do the kind of work that we're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll point out that the firm from Calaveras was the most expensive of all the firms that applied.
I got a question.
Oh, go ahead, Dennis.
This, I guess I'm looking at this and wondering how come we've had all these plans for these tanks all these years, and are we re-engineering stuff that's been basically already engineered? Is there a real need to update these plans? We're trying to get away from using consultants any more than we have to. Is this something that the district is in dire need of to do at this point while we're in these trying to hold, you were announcing last month that you wanted to hold costs down in operations to 25% or 25% down, which sounds like really a drastic cut, and yet we're coming back with more consulting engineer to do this. And I remember having a conversation about consulting engineers, and while if we need them, get them, but if we don't need them, let's don't do it. And I'm a little bit leery that we need this right now.
The fact is, without this, none of your R&R program for the water side can go forward. You're not re-engineering the work that you previously had. Ultimately, this lays the foundation for us to deliver those projects that we're committed to doing. And the only way to do that is to have someone who can do it with the depth on the bench to bring it all together. And this is the way to deliver those projects. This is something that cannot be done in-house. It doesn't have any bearing to the 23% efficiencies that we're going to try to acquire within the next 3 years for the O&M budget. This is all about delivery of your R&R program.
I'm sorry, Don.
I look at it just the opposite of what Dennis is looking at it, but we disagree a lot, so it doesn't matter. The reality is, for me, what's taking place is in October of last year, we obtained a statement of qualifications for 18 engineering firms. We knew last July, August, that we had R&R funds. we were told through the process that we were gonna hit the ground running. 9 months later, we're having a conversation about this. If this is running, this is going at about 1 mile per hour. I'm a little frustrated that things aren't moving quicker, that we didn't anticipate our needs, and that we didn't arrange these things. If we did this in October and it was November, I wouldn't be bringing this up. But right now, we're in March. Best case scenario is April. It takes us almost 9, 10 months to get to the point where we're picking out somebody to start looking at our tank program. This is not running, guys. This is business as usual kind of stuff, and I'm frustrated with it because we sold it to the public in terms of we've got critical needs and we're going to get out there and take care of business. So I'm frustrated with it, to be honest with you. I anticipated a lot more movement, a lot faster. We're going to be a year into this, and everybody's going to be asking, what in the world are we doing? So I'll support this because I think it's critically important, and I think we need to do it, but I'm not real happy. I'll make a motion.
Second?
We got a motion and a second. Any other comment on this item?
I'm pleased to report that we now have enough cash to pay for this contract. Thank you.
Well, you can sign a contract before you can necessarily pay for it. But it is worth noting that we're looking at some of these things, through September 14th, so there is quite a bit of work to be done.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 5-0. Community reports. Any community reports from the dais? Go ahead, Don.
The Tunnel Tap Ad Hoc Committee went on a tour. Dennis and I went and looked at the Tunnel Tap, took a bunch of pictures, checked out the road, checked out the PG&E, did all of our due diligence on site, and we're working hard to get a report to you as quickly as we can.
Did you run the tap?
Yeah, Dennis did.
That explains a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Pretty
Any other
raw.
committee reports? Okay, seeing none, legislative update. Anyone got a legislative update?
I provided a legislative summary from Aqua to each of the board members. It's before you. I think a key note is the competing bonds, and which bonds are going to be, which bill is ultimately going to carry forward the bond issue in November.
Are there any bets? Which one's going to prevail?
Not in the present.
No. Okay, thank you, Mitch. Bay Delta issues.
They've all been resolved.
All Bay Delta issues have been resolved, we got reported. Anything else? All right. Reports. Start with Mitch, General Manager report.
We do have the monthly follow-on of currently what's going on. Obviously, that the drought conditions are not relieving, although there is some expectation of a El Nino condition building for next year. So, welcome to California. The weather changes. Reservoir condition did improve somewhat since last report. However, it's been reported earlier today multiple times, the reservoirs are challenged. Here's a closer look at New Hogan. It's up right about a third full.
Wow, look at that line go.
Here's what's happening at New Maloney's. again, a much bigger surface area. It's not quite so dramatic. This is the real story. Ultimately, the snow is not backing up any of the water supply. So how that plays out, particularly late summer and deliveries to agriculture, is the critical issue statewide. The red line there is 1977. So ultimately, we're not too far away from what we saw in that most recent case of history. I'd like to remind everyone that in California, an average is just a calculation. Not one of those lines really follows average very closely. And that's 10 years of history. I always encourage people not to be confused, not to doubt the drought, but not to get confused. CCWD is calling for voluntary reductions. I've thrown out a 20-gallon challenge, ultimately trying to make sure that people understand that while we'll likely have enough drinking water for all of our services this year, we are, as a state, all in a drought. And ultimately, economically, we are tied. Not only is the agricultural production going to be tied to what happens in our grocery stores, but if you look at the amount of exports and how it plays out in the Port of Stockton or the Port of Oakland, you could start to see that the feedback in our economy from those revenue sources that would be a factor of reduced agricultural production is something that we can't ignore. So the water restrictions for agriculture do threaten the statewide economy, and it can't be underestimated. We've got these materials out and around trying to make sure that people understand. And we do have places where people can go and get information on being drought smart. Here's a suite of things. There's also some of these links are on our website. Ultimately, there's a lot of good information out on what to do. But it takes common sense to sort through it. The kind of drought messaging that's out there may or may not be applicable to anybody's particular situation, and so we're asking people to weigh through it, and we're not trying to continue to repeat the same lines that you keep hearing over and over again, because ultimately people have to make their choices. Here's what we're looking at for our capital R&R, the money that's coming in today, and how we're spending it. So again, while the rate went into effect it was passed last July, it went into effect in the fall, and here's what the revenues are starting to look like as they're coming in. For wastewater, a similar picture, but as Jeff alluded to earlier, certainly wastewater is going to be where the critical path lies for getting our cash flow aligned with the projects and the delivery times. And the fact that we've got a couple 800-pound elephant or 800-pound gorillas out there in year 3 and 4 of the program provide a lot of uncertainty to us. So ultimately, we're moving forward. Jeff, did you want to jump in?
Can I add something here? Obviously, on the sewer side, we have fewer connections, which limits our cash flow. If you take a look at this, in this particular quarter, January to March, we had some significant expenditures in Poker Flats Lift Station 9, 10, and 11, and they're starting on the upper electrical upgrades on Copper Cove Lift Station 15 and 18. So we had about $109,000 worth of expenditures. But you can see on the far right column down here at the bottom, after collecting $281,000, we only have $53,000 in the bank. So cash flow is a critical issue here. We're doing projects as they come along, but it was real critical for the board to pass that loan agreement so we can fund some of the larger projects as we get moving. So this is something that we have to keep an eye out on cash flow. We had the same thing in water. We've got Reach 3A going, Reach 1A going. We've got a number of these projects coming up that are going to take a significant drain on our cash reserves. And remember, all we have is that R&R money to pay for this. But utilities making significant progress on the Poker Flats lift station.
Okay. The DC summary was the Federal Affairs Committee meeting in DC. We did the Federal Affairs work. Drought is the big word. It's amazing how not only within the government, within the DC, but within the general populace, how much knowledge there is regarding the California drought. It certainly got the attention of many key decision makers in the nation. We also dealt with EPA and regulatory issues, but the key thing that we learned was the infrastructure. The WRDA bill is moving through it, and the WIFIA bill is coming out right behind that, or the monies that are there. So the WRDA is going to authorize the Corps of Engineers to continue to move forward with their programs. Probably not going to take new authorizations. WIFIA is going to be an opportunity for us because ultimately there's going to be some set-asides for small systems and maybe...
Acronym stand for WIFIA?
WIFIA is the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act. It's patterned after what had previously been done within the transportation program for years and years because WRDA was getting stalled out and it was a core specific. So the WIFIA will allow the EPA and the Corps to allocate monies out. So it's actually going to hopefully give us...
It's a way around the earmarks.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. And I wanted to point out for CCWD when we were there, I mean, it was terrific. We did get access to the commissioner and ultimately talked about how we would get access to new Maloney's. We had the legislative relief that was proposed to give us access to new Maloney's as part of our supply portfolio approach. Getting some storage in those reservoirs would be a big asset for us. It wasn't going to go forward in the Senate, particularly with anything specific to a CCWD. So we're moving forward with trying to work with the other large stakeholders in New Maloney's and see if we can actually create a comprehensive model. Right now, everybody has a different model, and we use our different models in order to disagree. But ultimately, we have some indications that there may be enough float if the models could be combined and we had a comprehensive model that if we could create some float, then there might be room to negotiate and CCWD acquire some storage. And the Bureau is supportive of that approach. So we'll be coming to you all hopefully within the next month or two following a meeting of the major stakeholders. And if there in fact there's agreement, this will be the opportunity to maybe work collaboratively to achieve that. We also met with the U.S. Forest Service, and again, the Water Forest Nexus. This was a follow-up from the D.C. visit of last summer, ultimately talking about the Headwaters projects, the Headwaters principles, and the part and parcel to how that fits into our supply portfolio to deal with not only what we need in the way of water, but what California needs in water solutions. And I think the overarching issue is it really means economic development and economic growth in our community as we address the backlog of maintenance and repair. This a legacy issue that's been left in these forests. And so ultimately, not much in the way of disagreement with that. A lot of support to continue on. The Forest Service not only backed their regional office to help us in the collaborative process, we now are considering a 10,000 acre piece of U.S. Forest Service land in which to conduct the pilot study on, and so that's getting evaluated now. And again, it goes back to the continuity of those relationships that we've had with the with senior agency reps in Washington, D.C.
Where is that pilot project?
It's on the McCullum watershed in upper reaches off of Highway 4. So where Highway 4 and the McCullum kind of comes over, it's up there. That can, and we've got Prop 84, Round 3 implementation grant process is moving forward. Certainly in the next couple months, either through the MOC or through the T-stand, we're going to be looking at those applications. It's going to be an accelerated process. Certainly, there's going to be a lot of emphasis on drought relief. So we have a few projects to talk about what we think are going to line up there. So that's coming forward. There's some presentations coming on next month or two, or next week, in fact. Actually, tomorrow night, there's one focus on the foothill water beyond the drought at Columbia Community College. Certainly, I think, Don, you're going to mention that later. And then we also want to focus a little bit on Assembly Bill, the State Assembly Bill 1331, which is by Assembly Member Rendon, and it's becoming the lead of the bond bills right now. We've done a technical review of it, we've got some input, and ultimately we will be coming forward with some proposed correspondence towards how to make that work. This is the one which Director Stump referred to earlier, that the author has put another $1 billion towards it. So it's now up at $8 billion. So as we start watching the bonds grow, they believe the break point for a bond to be successful, anything above 10 billion is likely to be dead. I'm not quite sure my analysis would put it there, but $1 billion here, $1 billion there, and it adds up. So long story short, the front-running bond initiative is going to be about $8 billion. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mitch. Lynn Gentry's not here. Jeff Meyer, anything further?
Nothing further.
Thank you. Bill Purley's not here. Okay, that's it for reports. Whoa. Stop. We've got some technical issues going on. We're going to do board reports. I'm just going to move away from the microphone a little bit. Board reports, Jeff. Don.
February 27th, Bob invited me to a meeting at Murphy Sanitary to discuss long-term potential for partnerships. Bob can comment, but I didn't really feel like this was anything that was going to be happening in the near future. They seem to think that they're doing real well, so that's their feelings. February 28th, I met with DWR regarding BDCP and flow issues regarding the what their expectations are as far as backfilling in to support X2 salt intrusion. March 4th, I had a Mountain County's board meeting. You guys got the agenda and the minutes and everything on that. The big deal with that is we adopted our not wild and scenic, our headwaters, and Bob was instrumental in putting that together. We had a 3-person team that led it, and I'm really, really happy with it because unlike Aquas, this is definitely Mountain County centric, so I felt that was a real positive thing for us. March 5th, we had an EPOC meeting. It was, I didn't get to stay for the entire meeting, but I felt like it was a real positive thing. Then I had to go to a Mountain County's IRWM committee meeting, and we formed Mountain County's, this is our 3rd committee. We've got a governance committee, we've got a ledge committee, and now we have an IRWM committee. We're finding in the Mountain Counties region where there's really only about 2.5 real strong IRWMs, and the others are really, really struggling. And the ones that are really struggling are the ones that need it the most. So we're trying to figure out how we can support them with information and a better understanding of the process so that they can be successful also, because it's really the way you get money from the state. Then March 7th, Dennis and I did the tunnel tap tour. March 11th, we had an UMRA advisory committee meeting, and most of it, Mitch was on that call, most of that was tied to how the round 3 is going to be changing and how quickly it's going to be changing. So that's a real big deal. And then March 11th, same yesterday, it was the Mountain Counties program. France Spivey Weber, she's the vice chair of the water board, the State Water Resource Control Board. And it was real interesting because Fran tends to talk a lot really nicely and not say anything, but she was really pretty strong in terms of what she was talking about. And Paul Stein was there, and he asked a real pointed question in terms of water rights. And she came right back and said, you know, with the drought, we're going to start limiting just by date, the water rights all the way down to pre-14s. And she seemed to think that was something that was going to happen as far as limiting your availability of water. She was more focused on riparian. She said, we might even get into the riparian. And I'm thinking, well, hold it. That means everybody that has a water right, unless you're riparian, is probably in trouble. And that was her indication. So this was, if somebody missed that, they weren't paying real close attention. The other issue, and she told me this at lunch, is Metropolitan Water is going to start a program either this week or next week where they're going to go to not their ratepayers, but to the general public and offer $100 a square foot to take out your lawn. So if you've got about an acre of lawn down south right now, you've got a gold mine sitting there, because that's a huge amount of money. So this is a huge shift, because normally Metropolitan supports the different agencies that work with Metropolitan rather than going out on their own. So this is a big deal. We had OES there, and the takeaway for OES is that if you want money regarding the drought, you have to, the county has to designate it as such, and then it's just like a regular big fire or anything else. So I know that Bill is working with our county OES, and I don't foresee any of these kind of issues coming up, having ability to get backfilled for any costs associated with this. But they're deadly serious at OES. They see this as a real big deal. Not necessarily in the foothills though. And then the real takeaway for me was the Bureau got up and they had a whole presentation on storage for high elevation. And this, I mean, the Bureau never talks about little storage up at a high elevation. So they've really drank the Kool-Aid, and they're after it. At lunch, that's all they could talk about is, where do we find this? How do we get Aqua's list? How do we talk to the Water Commission? And it's like, this seems like a brand new thing that they're really excited about. So I'm hopeful at some point we have a potential of getting some money from one of these folks. As you guys probably read about the TUD water transfer, South San Joaquin, everyone was talking about it in Sacramento in terms of, this is like, you know, somehow real amazing. I'm kind of lost on me, but the reality of South San Joaquin deciding that they would sell water to the tribe in Tuolumne County, and then in turn the tribe would sell it to the county or TUD at about $400 an acre foot, which is, well, everyone thinks it was considered dirt cheap, but the TUD board seemed to think they were getting ripped off at $400 an acre foot. So I think that's probably why South San Joaquin went to the tribe rather than trying to deal with TUD. But they've got some uphill climbs in order to actually utilize the water.
The tribe is not making any money on that,
No.
as they said.
Yeah, it's incidental costs associated with it, nothing big. And then as Mitch said, tomorrow in the Sonora High Auditorium, Columbia College is putting on a focus on foothill water beyond the drought. And that starts at 6:30 at the high school auditorium. And then, let's see, Mitch, I'd like to schedule a building ad hoc committee meeting, if you can. And at the next board meeting, if we could get a report on the ag study that was completed about a year ago, or 6 months ago, or whatever, I'd really like to see how that came out. And that's all I got, Scott.
Wow. Thank you, Don.
Maybe there's another sheet here.
Bob, you got anything?
Yeah. Monday, I had the opportunity of going down to UC Merced, and the Sierra Nevada Research Institute did their own draft presentation, and there was some really interesting stuff that came out of it, including a soil specialist who talked about water storage in mountain meadows. And there was also a climatologist there who did some really interesting work. Roger Bales did his usual thing. The one thing came through loud and clear, and we can all take heart in this, is that we're not the only people creating silos. It was really interesting to listen to some of these people and then hear some of the comments of specialists in other areas who really couldn't articulate what they wanted to say regarding something that was outside their sphere of expertise. So, you know, it's kind of typical from everything we do, and if we have any role at all, maybe it ought to be to break down some of those silos. There is I had a water management committee meeting on yesterday, as a matter of fact, and one of the things that Water Management Committee at Aqua is doing is putting together a group of subcommittees to address a lot of different water management issues. And what I thought was interesting, the reason why I'm mentioning it now, is because they're going outside the Water Management Committee membership to solicit participation. And if anybody here is interested in getting engaged with the Water Management Committee on a specific issue, check with me and I can fill you in on the options and the different subcommittees that exist so that you can participate. There's a camera meeting next Wednesday. What is it, 2 o'clock?
2:30.
2:30, okay. I asked Mitch to see if we could schedule a legislative committee meeting, and that'll happen relatively soon. In relation to what Don said regarding the ag study, I think there was an inclusion in some of the material that was given to us, showing what's going on in eastern Stanislaus County with regard to orchards, and it's kind of frightening. Additional 40,000 acres, I think, of new orchard production, and they're sucking everything out of the ground, and I'm really concerned. In fact, it's changing my perspective a little bit on what we may want to address as ag issues here in Calaveras County, so we need to keep that in the back of our mind. You know, the Mongol hordes are arriving at our gate, so we have to be very careful. With regard to what Don said about Franz Spivey Weber and the issue of water rights, I think Jeff may remember, I don't know that anybody else does, well, Don will because I shared the information. 6 or 8 years ago, State Water Resources Control Board said they were coming after water rights. And I just think right now they're using the drought as an excuse to move that along, and I just want to let you know that that's nothing new. It's you got to keep listening and understanding what's going on down there to get an idea of whether or not we're going to be losing our water rights and how that's going to play itself out. Beyond that, I have nothing.
Dennis?
Well, actually, I just have a few short questions. The first thing is Mitch sent us an email about, I don't know if there's anything that you're going to report on this Norman and Barbara Falahy on their wastewater issues, and said that you responded to that, and I don't know if that's anything that we can report on or not. And if there is, I'd like to know what the status is.
Okay, I can report on it. At this point now, I did give, we all received a letter from a ratepayer with an empty lot with water service. They had put in an application 100 years ago for a septic system, and that application expired. It's still an empty lot. I guess the letter to us said that lot was worth $100,000 at one point. Now it's worth $30,000 up the hill somewhere along the Highway 4 corridor, I think Arnold area. I'm not positive. Anyway, they do live in I think in Oregon or Washington. I think it's in Washington.
It's not an agendized item, guys, come on.
Yeah, well, it's a board. We're in board report. We're okay to talk about it. Anyway, I did call the gentleman on behalf of the board and explained our policy. that we can't make an exception to, that they're gonna receive a bill. And his final question was what happens if he's unable to pay the bill? And I explained it's a tax lien on the property. And that was it.
I guess when I read this, I didn't see where it even involved CCWD, so that was a county issue that they had paid money to.
Well, the septic system was a county issue. The question that he presented to us